There is a quiet difference between the one who runs after the world and the one the world cannot help but turn toward. You can feel it even before a single word is spoken. One energy reaches out, restless and asking to be seen, while the other stands rooted, steady, and somehow impossible to ignore. We have been taught to chase, to seek approval, to gather attention like it is proof of our worth. But there is a deeper truth whispering beneath all that noise. It tells us that what is meant for us does not need to be hunted down. It is drawn gently and powerfully to those who know who they are. And today, we are going to uncover that truth, the difference between chasing attention and becoming so aligned within yourself that attention finds you without a single plea. Attention is loud. It calls out. It reaches. It performs. It asks the world, "Do you see me now?" and then grows restless when the answer is delayed. There is a kind of urgency in it, a trembling need to be acknowledged, to be validated, to be held up by the eyes of others. And for a moment, it can feel like power. The applause, the glances, the fleeting recognition, they can dress themselves as fulfillment, but listen closely, and you will hear the hollowness beneath the noise. Because anything that must beg to be seen is already unsure of its own existence. Presence, on the other hand, does not raise its voice. It does not compete, does not chase, does not plead. It simply is. And in that stillness, there is a gravity so undeniable that people feel it before they understand it. Presence does not arrive with a performance. It arrives with truth. It is the quiet confidence of someone who has nothing to prove and nothing to hide. It is the calm of a soul that has made peace with itself and therefore does not need the world to confirm its worth. You see, when you are consumed with chasing attention, you begin to shape yourself into what you believe others will accept. You bend, you adjust, you become a reflection of expectations rather than an expression of your own essence. And in doing so, you lose the very thing that could have made you unforgettable. Because the world may look at what you present, but it feels who you truly are. And no performance, no matter how polished, can replace the quiet authority of authenticity. There is something deeply powerful about a person who is fully present. They do not rush to fill silence because they are not afraid of it. They do not force connection because they trust what is real will come. Their energy speaks in ways words cannot. It says, "I am enough whether you notice me or not." And ironically, it is this very detachment from needing attention that draws people in, not out of obligation, but out of genuine curiosity, respect, and even admiration. So the question is not how loudly you can be seen, but how deeply you can be felt. Not how many eyes you can capture, but how many hearts recognize something real in you. Because attention will always be temporary. It comes and goes with trends, moods, and moments. But presence lingers. It leaves an imprint. It stays in the room long after you have walked away. And when you begin to understand this, something shifts within you. You stop exhausting yourself trying to be everywhere, trying to impress everyone, trying to prove something that never needed proof. Instead, you return to yourself. You stand a little taller, breathe a little deeper, and speak a little less, but mean every word. And in that shift, without force and without noise, you become magnetic in a way attention could never make you. There is a quiet exhaustion that comes from living your life in search of approval. It does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it hides behind a smile, behind constant effort, behind the habit of saying yes when your spirit is whispering no. You give a little more, try a little harder, hoping that somewhere in the giving, you will finally feel enough. But approval is a moving target. Just when you think you have reached it, it shifts, asking for more, demanding another version of you, until you are left wondering where your own voice went in the process. When you chase approval, you slowly begin to abandon yourself. You measure your worth by reactions, by praise, by how well you fit into the expectations of others. And the more you depend on those outside echoes, the quieter your inner truth becomes. It is not that you are weak, It is that you have been taught to look outward for something that has always lived within you, and that misunderstanding can drain even the strongest soul, leaving behind a kind of weariness that rest alone cannot fix. But self-worth is different. It does not arrive from applause, and it does not leave when the room grows silent. It is built in the unseen moments, in the choices you make when no one is watching, in the way you stand by your values even when it would be easier to bend. Self-worth is not loud, but it is deeply rooted. It does not ask for permission to exist. It simply declares, I am here and I am enough. And when a person begins to live from that place, something remarkable happens. They stop negotiating their value. They stop shrinking to make others comfortable or stretching themselves thin just to be accepted. There is a steadiness in them, a quiet assurance that fills every space they enter, not because they are trying to impress, but because they are no longer trying to prove anything at all. Their presence carries a kind of fullness, as if they are already complete, already whole. People can feel that difference even if they cannot name it. There is a certain peace around someone who knows their worth, a certain ease, a certain clarity. They are not pulled in every direction by opinions or trends because they are anchored within themselves. And that anchoring creates a presence that is far more powerful than any performance. It draws respect without demanding it, connection without forcing it, attention without chasing it. So the work is not to become more appealing to the world, but to become more honest with yourself. To listen to that inner voice you may have silenced, to honor the parts of you that do not fit neatly into expectations. Because the truth is, you were never meant to earn your worth. You were meant to recognize it. And once you do, you will find that the need for approval begins to fade, replaced by something far more sustaining. You will still be seen, still be heard, still be valued, but it will no longer feel like a struggle. It will feel natural, effortless, like something that belongs to you. And in that shift, your energy changes. The room feels it. Not because you demanded attention, but because your self-worth quietly filled the space in a way nothing else ever could. There is a kind of noise that fills the world, a restless sound made not just of words, but of effort, the constant need to explain, to justify, to prove. It shows up in over-talking, over-sharing, over-reaching for a reaction. It is the voice that says, let me make you understand why I matter. And beneath that voice, there is often a quiet uncertainty, a question waiting to be answered by someone else. Noise is not always volume. Sometimes it is the urgency behind it, the need to be acknowledged, to be affirmed, to be validated by anything outside of oneself. But silence carries a different kind of language. It does not rush to defend itself, does not scramble to be heard above the crowd. It stands still, grounded in its own knowing. And in that stillness, there is a strength that cannot be easily shaken. Silence does not mean absence. It means presence without desperation. It is the calm of someone who trusts that they do not need to announce their value for it to be real. You will notice that those who are most certain of themselves often say the least. Not because they have nothing to offer, but because they are not driven by the need to convince. They understand that truth does not require constant repetition. It reveals itself naturally through consistency, through character, through the quiet alignment between who they are and how they live. Their silence is not empty. It is full of self-assurance. And there is something deeply compelling about that. When a person is comfortable in their silence, it creates space for others to lean in, to listen more closely, to feel rather than just hear. It draws attention in a way noise never can, because it is not forcing itself upon anyone. It invites rather than demands. It holds a kind of dignity that speaks without words. On the other hand, when every moment is filled with noise, something gets lost. The message becomes tangled in the need for reaction. The more you try to make people see you, the less they truly feel you, because people do not connect with pressure, they connect with presence. And presence often lives in what is not said, in the pauses, in the restraint, in the quiet confidence that does not feel the need to fill every silence. This does not mean you must become voiceless or withdraw from expression. It means understanding when your words are coming from truth and when they are coming from the need to be validated. There is power in speaking, yes, but there is greater power in knowing you do not always have to, in choosing your words with intention, in allowing silence to carry what noise would only weaken. When you begin to embrace that, your energy changes. You no longer feel the urge to respond to everything, to prove yourself in every moment, to be seen at all costs. You become more selective, more grounded, more aware of your own presence, and that quiet restraint builds a kind of respect that cannot be demanded or forced. Because in the end, noise may capture attention for a moment, but silence leaves an impression that lingers. It tells the world, without a single word, that you are not here to seek approval. You are here to stand in your truth. And that kind of silence does not go unnoticed. It commands respect in a way noise never will. There is a subtle shrinking that happens when you spend your life in pursuit of something outside yourself. It is not always visible at first. From a distance, it may even look like ambition, like effort, like determination. But look a little closer, and you will see the cost of it. The way you begin to fold pieces of yourself away, the way you make yourself smaller in order to fit into spaces that were never designed for your truth. Chasing has a way of convincing you that you must adjust who you are to receive what you want, and in that adjustment, you slowly lose your sense of wholeness. When you chase, your energy is always reaching outward. It is stretched thin, pulled in different directions by expectations, opinions, and the fear of not being enough. You start to measure your steps, filter your voice, and question your instincts. There is a constant calculation. What will they think? How will this be received? Is this good enough? And in that constant reaching, you forget to stand. You forget that your value was never meant to be negotiated in the first place. But becoming is a return. It is not about adding more layers to yourself, but about removing what was never truly yours. It is the quiet, sometimes uncomfortable process of meeting yourself honestly, without the need to impress or perform. And in that honesty, something begins to open. You stop forcing, stop chasing, stop bending, and instead, you start to rise into your own shape. Expansion does not come from striving to be seen. It comes from allowing yourself to fully exist. It is in the way you speak without hesitation, in the way you stand without apology, in the way you honor your own voice even when it trembles. When you are no longer consumed with being accepted, you begin to experience a kind of freedom that cannot be given or taken away. Your energy is no longer scattered. It becomes centered, grounded, whole. And there is a quiet power in that wholeness. You are no longer shrinking yourself to fit into moments. You are allowing moments to meet you where you are. You are no longer asking for space. You are taking it simply by being present. There is no strain in it, no performance behind it, just a steady unfolding of who you have always been beneath the noise of expectation. People feel that expansion. They may not understand it, but they recognize it. It shows up as confidence without arrogance, as strength without force, as presence without effort. It is the difference between someone trying to enter a room and someone who shifts the room simply by walking in, not because they demanded attention, but because they carry something real, something rooted, something undeniable. So the question is no longer, how do I get them to notice me? But how do I come home to myself? Because in that return, in that becoming, you will find that you no longer need to chase anything. What is meant for you will not require you to shrink. It will meet you in your expansion, recognize you in your truth, and stay, not because you held onto it tightly, but because it was always aligned with who you chose to become. There is a kind of performance many people learn without ever realizing it. It is practiced in the way you smile when you do not feel joy, in the way you agree when something inside you quietly resists, in the way you present a polished version of yourself, hoping it will be easier for the world to accept. Performance is careful, calculated, shaped by what you think will be received well. And for a while, it can open doors. It can bring attention, approval, even admiration. But what it cannot bring is true connection, because connection does not respond to perfection, it responds to truth. Authenticity is something entirely different. It does not ask, will they like this version of me? It asks, is this honest? And sometimes honesty is not convenient. Sometimes it is rough around the edges, uncertain, still growing, but it is real. And there is a quiet courage in choosing to be real in a world that often rewards performance. It means standing in your own voice, even when it does not echo what others expect to hear. When you live in performance, you are always aware of the audience. Every word is measured, every action filtered. There is a distance between who you are and what you show, and maintaining that distance takes energy. It creates a subtle tension, a feeling that you must always be on, always presenting, always adjusting. And over time, that tension becomes exhausting, not because you are incapable, but because you were never meant to live as a version of yourself that needs constant approval. Authenticity, on the other hand, releases that tension. It allows you to exist without the burden of constant adjustment. You no longer have to remember who you were pretending to be, because you are simply being. And in that honesty, there is a kind of ease that cannot be imitated. It shows up in your voice, in your presence, in the way you carry yourself. It is not loud, but it is deeply felt. People are drawn to that even if they cannot explain why. Because authenticity gives others permission to lower their own masks. It creates a space where pretense is no longer required, where connection can happen without effort. And that kind of connection is rare. It is not built on impressions, but on understanding, not on perfection, but on truth. Performance may win attention, but authenticity earns trust. And trust is what lingers. It is what builds relationships, what creates respect, what allows something meaningful to grow. Because people may admire what you present, but they connect with what you reveal. They remember how you made them feel, not how perfectly you played a role. So there comes a moment where you must decide whether you will continue performing for acceptance or begin living in a way that reflects who you truly are. It is not always the easier path, but it is the one that leads to something real. Because what is drawn to performance will only stay as long as the performance continues. But what is drawn to authenticity will recognize you even in your quietest moments and remain, not because you tried to impress, but because you chose to be true. There is something the world understands without ever speaking it aloud. It reads energy before it listens to words. It senses intention before it believes expression. You can walk into a room and say all the right things, wear all the right faces, follow all the right patterns, but if beneath it there is a quiet desperation, it will be felt, not always consciously, not always immediately, but deeply enough to shape how people respond to you. Because desperation has a weight to it. It leans, it reaches, it asks without asking. And the world, in its unspoken wisdom, does not bow to what begs. Desperation is not always obvious. It can hide behind ambition, disguise itself as effort, even pretend to be passion. But its root is in lack, the belief that something essential is missing and must be found in the hands, opinions, or validation of others. And when you move from that place, everything becomes urgent. Every interaction feels like it matters too much. Every silence feels like rejection. Every delay feels like loss. You begin to grip tighter, speak faster, try harder, and in doing so, you push away the very things you are trying to hold on to. Confidence, however, is not built on urgency. It does not rush, does not grasp, does not cling. It stands quietly, firmly, without the need to announce itself. It is not the loud declaration of, "Look at me," but the steady understanding of, "I know who I am." And that knowing changes everything. It softens your movements, steadies your voice, grounds your presence. There is no frantic energy in it, no need to convince, just a calm certainty that does not depend on the reactions of others. Moment by moment, choice by choice. It is built when you stop abandoning yourself for approval, when you begin to trust your own voice, when you learn to stand even when no one is clapping. It grows in the quiet decisions to honor who you are, even when it would be easier to seek acceptance by becoming someone else. And as that confidence takes root, something begins to shift in how the world meets you. You are no longer overlooked in the same way, no longer questioned in the same tone, no longer dismissed so easily, not because the world has changed, but because you have. Your energy no longer asks, it declares. It no longer reaches, it holds. And in that shift, you begin to understand a powerful truth. The world may notice desperation, but it does not respect it. It may hear noise, but it does not remember it. But confidence leaves an imprint. It does not need to chase attention, because attention is naturally drawn to it. It does not need to demand respect, because respect rises in its presence. And when you truly step into that space, you realize that there was never a need to beg the world to see you. All along, it was waiting for you to see yourself. There is something about attention that feels immediate, almost intoxicating. It arrives quickly, lights up a moment, and for an instant, it can make you feel seen, important, even powerful. But if you sit with it long enough, you begin to notice how fleeting it truly is. The applause quiets, the eyes turn elsewhere, the moment passes, and what once felt so significant begins to dissolve, leaving behind a question that lingers quietly. What remains when the attention is gone? Because attention, by its nature, is temporary. It is tied to moments, to circumstances, to shifting interests that are never meant to stay still. It can be given just as easily as it is taken away. And if your sense of worth is built upon it, you will always find yourself chasing the next moment, the next reaction, the next sign that you still matter. It becomes a cycle, one that keeps you moving, but never truly fulfilled. Energy, however, plays by a different set of rules. It does not depend on a moment, it creates one. It is not something people simply notice, it is something they feel, often without understanding why. Long after the words are forgotten, long after the surface details fade, energy remains. It settles into memory, into emotion, into the quiet spaces where real impressions are formed. You have felt this before, whether you named it or not. The way someone's presence stayed with you after they left, the way a conversation echoed in your mind, not because of what was said, but because of how it made you feel. That is energy. It does not rush in and out like attention. It lingers. It roots itself in a place deeper than sight or sound. And the truth is, you are always carrying an energy, whether you are aware of it or not. It is shaped by how you see yourself, how you speak to yourself, how honestly you live. If you are filled with doubt, with the need to be validated, with the fear of not being enough, that energy will be felt, even if your words try to hide it. But if you are grounded, if you are at peace with who you are becoming, if you move with quiet certainty, that too will be felt more deeply than anything you could ever try to prove. This is why chasing attention can feel so empty over time, because it focuses on what is seen while ignoring what is felt. It asks, are they looking at me? Instead of, what do they experience when I am present? And those are two very different questions with two very different outcomes. When you begin to shift your focus from attention to energy, everything changes. You become less concerned with being noticed and more intentional about how you show up. You speak with meaning instead of volume. You act with purpose instead of urgency. You allow your presence to be an extension of your truth rather than a performance for approval. And in that shift, something powerful happens. You stop leaving behind moments that are quickly forgotten and start leaving behind impressions that cannot be easily erased. Because attention may come and go, but energy stays. It lingers in the hearts of those you encounter, in the spaces you enter, in the quiet memory of who you were when you didn't try to be anything at all. So instead of asking how you can hold attention, begin asking what kind of energy you carry, because one will always fade with time, but the other has the power to remain long after you are gone. There is a misunderstanding many people carry, a quiet belief that magnetism is something granted from the outside, that it is found in appearance, in status, in how many people turn their heads when you walk by. So they search for it in places that were never meant to hold it. They adjust their image, refine their words, shape their lives into something they hope will be admired. But no matter how much they gather, something still feels missing, because magnetism does not live in what you collect. It lives in what you cultivate within yourself. It is not built in the eyes of others. It is born in the moments when you are alone with your own thoughts, when there is no audience to impress, no approval to win. It is shaped in the way you speak to yourself when no one else is listening, in the standards you hold when no one is watching, in the quiet decisions that define your character without ever being seen. These are the places where real magnetism begins, not in performance, but in truth. When you look outside for it, you become dependent on things that are always changing. Opinions shift, attention fades, validation comes and goes without warning. And if your sense of self is tied to those things, you will always feel unsteady, always searching, always trying to hold on to something that was never meant to be permanent. But when you begin to turn inward, something different starts to take shape. You begin to build a foundation that does not move with the world's opinions. There is a certain strength in knowing who you are without needing it to be confirmed. It is not loud or forceful, but it is deeply rooted. It shows up in the way you carry yourself, in the way you respond rather than react, in the way you remain steady even when the world around you is uncertain. This kind of inner alignment creates a presence that cannot be manufactured, because it is not something you put on. It is something you become. And people feel that, not because you ask them to, not because you try to show them, but because it is real. There is no strain in it, no effort to convince. It is simply there, in your energy, in your stillness, in the quiet confidence that does not need to explain itself. It draws others in not through force, but through authenticity, not through appearance, but through essence. The truth is, magnetism is not about being the most noticed person in the room. It is about being the most grounded in yourself. It is about walking into a space without needing to be seen and being felt anyway. It is about speaking without needing to impress and being heard because your words carry weight. It is about existing in a way that is so aligned, so genuine, that it creates a natural pull without any effort at all. So the search must change direction, not outward, but inward, not toward what can be gained, but toward what can be understood and strengthened within, because everything you have been looking for in the world's response is already waiting inside you, steady and unshaken. And when you begin to nurture that, when you begin to trust it, you will realize something that changes everything. You were never lacking magnetism. You were only looking for it in the wrong place. There is a quiet trap hidden in the need to prove yourself. It begins, innocently enough, with the desire to be understood, to be recognized, to show the world what you are capable of. So you explain, you demonstrate, you go the extra mile to make your worth visible. You think that if you just say a little more, do a little more, give a little more, then finally they will see you clearly. But somewhere along that path, the proving becomes endless, because the more you try to convince, the more it feels like something is still left unproven. And people can sense that effort, not always consciously, but deeply enough to shape how they respond. When you are constantly proving yourself, it carries an unspoken message that your value is still up for debate, that it needs to be justified, confirmed, agreed upon, and instead of strengthening your presence, it can quietly weaken it. Because what is truly solid does not need to be repeatedly explained. What is real does not need to chase belief. There is a kind of tension in proving. It rushes your words, sharpens your tone, fills your energy with urgency. You begin to overextend, offering more than is necessary, hoping it will finally be enough. But the more you reach, the more it feels like something is slipping away, not because you lack value, but because you are placing it in the hands of others to decide. Now contrast that with the person who no longer feels the need to prove. They speak, but they do not over-explain. They act, but they do not overperform. There is a steadiness in them, a quiet understanding that their worth is not something to be argued or defended. And because of that, their presence feels different. It feels grounded, certain, complete. There is no pressure in it, no hidden request for validation, just a calm clarity that stands on its own. And strangely, that is what makes people see them more clearly, because when there is no effort to convince, there is space to observe. When there is no urgency to be believed, there is room for belief to form naturally. The absence of proving creates a kind of trust, not forced, not demanded, but quietly built through consistency and authenticity. You begin to realize that constantly explaining yourself does not make you more understood. Often, it does the opposite. It creates noise where there could have been clarity. It shifts the focus from your truth to your attempt to defend it. And in that shift, something essential gets lost. But when you stand in your truth without the need to prove it, something powerful happens. Your actions begin to speak in ways words never could. Your consistency becomes your evidence. Your presence becomes your statement. And people no longer need to be convinced because they can see it for themselves in a way that feels real and undeniable. This does not mean you will never be misunderstood. It does not mean everyone will immediately recognize your worth, but it does mean you are no longer dependent on that recognition to stand firm in who you are. You are no longer chasing belief, you are living your truth. And in that shift, the dynamic changes completely. The more you try to prove, the more your energy asks to be validated. But the less you prove, the more your energy declares that nothing needs to be questioned. And that quiet declaration has a way of reaching people far more deeply than any explanation ever could. Because in the end, people do not believe what is forced upon them. They believe what they can feel, what they can witness, what unfolds naturally without pressure. And when you stop trying to prove your worth, you give them the space to finally see it.